Hi, Jenny Lynn here from theopenmindtherapist.com, talking to you about chronic fatigue syndrome and how to treat it. One of the things I wanted to talk about today was the psycho-spiritual profile of sufferers of chronic fatigue. Now, there may be quite a few comments on this, and I'm happy to accept them as maybe not your reality if you have chronic fatigue. But I also want to talk about the unconscious nature of drivers that come from the soul, because we have really become very externally referenced as a society. We are always looking outside of ourselves for answers. We go to doctors, we consult with all sorts of people to get advice on X, Y and Z about our lives. We're always going outside. The society has become very complex. We need, in order to maintain this lifestyle that we live, we have to keep consulting experts who can come in and sort out the plumbing, the hot water, the heating. You know, we can't do it all anymore. Once upon a time, the whole tribe looked after themselves, but we can't anymore. So we are constantly externally referenced. We look to compare ourselves with other people. How much money are we earning? What car do we drive? What house do I have? You know, am I thin? Am I fat? Do I am thinner than that person or fatter than that person? Is my hair the right colour? You know, we're always looking outside of ourselves, and so that's the background we grow up in. That's who we are in our modern society. We are very externally referenced. Now, with external referencing, we're always kind of placing our locus of evaluation outside of ourselves. So we're kind of looking always to place pressure on us to be as good as, or seeking outside because we don't have the specialisms anymore. Now this, in a way, with people with chronic fatigue has gone wild. It's gone into overdrive. People with chronic fatigue have been raised from the cradle to be very highly dependent on external validation, external praise, external locus of evaluation. So they're always looking outside of themselves to discover who they are in relation to other people. Now, the problem with this is that because everyone does it, it doesn't just looks like a matter of degree. You know, why would doing that a little bit more than somebody else create what would you kind of call it, the foundations, if you like, for chronic fatigue? I think it's because if that's your modus operandi, and if you don't know how to find yourself within yourself, and you're constantly referring outside of yourself, I often call it the potter's wheel. If your locus of evaluation isn't central on the potter's wheel, if it's slightly off, it's going to really knock everything out of kilter. As it rotates on the table, it's not going to be central, and it's going to take a lot of effort to try and keep it on the wheel. So that's how I see it, that if your modus operandi is very, very externally referenced, then it's going to take you more energy to try and stay there than it is if you're in your centre. And what you find is people with chronic fatigue are incredibly conscientious pleasers. So they're very, very keen to please, because that's how they earn their right to be here. Now, that's how they see themselves in relation to others. Now, where does that come from? And this is something else I wanted to talk about. Where does that external referencing come from? Because you will find that people with chronic fatigue are all very different. They all have very different backgrounds. It's not like, oh, they've all been sexually abused or they've all been beaten. No, some have, some haven't. But it's usually because they either had to watch out for themselves in that way, so they become very, very compliant, very vigilant, hyper-vigilant, always watching to make sure they were gauging the situation right, and therefore always studying other people, always studying how they can fit in. Or, and any one of a number of different ideas along this continuum, or they had very, very high pressure parents who were wanted the best for them and were putting a lot of pressure on them to be something, whether it be a carer for them, or whether it be a high-flying university graduate or a doctor or whatever. So what you've got in all cases is this tendency to always be looking outside to please someone somewhere. What happens over the years though, this becomes completely unconscious. It just becomes the backdrop to your life, the context of how you are in life. So one of the things you might do as a therapist, if you're taking clients on, psychotherapy clients, is to be looking at the stories people tell you about their childhood. How safe was it for them? How many people did they have to please? How easy was it for them to get social strokes? How easy was it for them to get acceptance and love? What were the conditions on that? So things like that. So so by the time chronic fatigue has set in, I'm going to talk about triggering it in the next video, the triggers for chronic fatigue. By the time a trigger has set in and chronic fatigue develops, it looks like the trigger has caused it. It looks like it's this, that or the other that has caused it. But in fact, what's given it such fertile ground is this constant exhausting external referencing that goes on with chronic fatiguers. And what's more is the unconscious nature of it, because everyone does it. Okay, everyone externally references to some degree or another, but those with chronic fatigue have been schooled and trained to externally reference as much as possible from their earliest years. So I want to stop there, and I'll talk next about triggers in one of my next videos. Okay, thanks.